Jungkook trembled when Jimin grabbed his hand. The staff didn't know what to do. Flushed face fire. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting cold streaks across the backstage floor. Jungkook's pulse hammered against his ribs, each beat louder than the last, as if the entire world had shrunk to the space between him and Jimin. He was cornered near the racks of costumes, staff rushing past with whispered urgency, cameras perched like vultures waiting for a misstep. And then, Jimin's hand was on his. "Don't move," Jimin murmured, his voice barely above the hum of the fluorescent bulbs. The warmth of his grip seeped into Jungkook's skin, a fire that was both intoxicating and terrifying. His fingers trembled despite the frantic attempt to hide it. Jungkook had never felt anyone's touch like this, commanding, urgent, yet trembling with the same fear he felt. The staff froze, unsure where to look. Some glanced at each other, mouths opening and closing like fish out of water, as if the sight of the two idols, caught in an almost intimate struggle, violated some invisible rule. Jungkook's breath hitched. The scent of Jimin's cologne, a faint trace of citrus and something floral, was overwhelming. He swallowed hard, trying to keep his composure. "You don't understand," Jungkook whispered, though his words trembled with vulnerability. He wanted to pull back, but Jimin's gaze pinned him in place. Dark eyes, shimmering with something raw and unspoken, locked onto him. "I can't, this isn't." "You can," Jimin interrupted, pressing a thumb gently against the back of Jungkook's hand. His voice was steady, a lifeline in the chaos, yet every muscle in his body betrayed tension. "I won't let them take this from us. Not now. Not ever." Jungkook's chest tightened. His mind was a storm of doubt and desire, a confusing mixture of fear and longing that made his knees weak. He had always known Jimin had a presence that could make the world disappear, but this closeness, this defiance, was unlike anything he had experienced. He wanted to retreat, to hide behind rehearsals, schedules, and the suffocating safety of routine, but he couldn't. Not when Jimin's eyes burned into him with that impossible intensity. "Do you trust me?" Jimin asked, a whisper that somehow carried the weight of all unspoken promises. Jungkook's throat constricted, the question threading through his very bones. Trust. It wasn't just about the staff, the cameras, the world outside. It was about himself, his own heart, which had betrayed him countless times before. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. The simple gesture was a surrender and an accusation all at once, proof that he was vulnerable, proof that he was ready to let someone in. Jimin's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile, the kind that held secrets and warmth all at once. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the moment shattered with the screech of a rolling cart and the shouted instructions of a staff member trying to corral the chaos. Both of them recoiled slightly, but the contact lingered in the space between them like a live wire. Jungkook's fingers were still tingling from the touch, a spark that refused to die. The staff, still staring in awkward shock, quickly averted their eyes, muttering excuses about schedules and delays. They had no idea what had just passed, no idea how a simple hand grab had sent the air itself trembling, how the two idols had shared a silent confession without a single word. "Go," Jimin said finally, releasing Jungkook's hand, though not without a reluctant pause that spoke volumes. "Go rehearse. I'll handle this." Jungkook nodded, his legs feeling unsteady as if gravity had decided to play a cruel trick. He stepped back, pretending to check his schedule, but every fiber of his being was still drawn to Jimin. The corridors felt impossibly long as he moved, echoes of their contact burning into memory. He couldn't shake the sensation, the electricity, the fear, the exhilaration all tangled into one chaotic heartbeat. As he disappeared into the maze of backstage hallways, Jimin remained behind, eyes scanning the bustling crew, his mind a whirl of calculation and emotion. He had made a choice, an unspoken vow, and it was as thrilling as it was dangerous. The staff, unaware of the silent storm they had just witnessed, continued their frantic shuffle, oblivious to the history being rewritten in the spaces between their footsteps. Jungkook leaned against the wall, closing his eyes, trying to steady the racing of his pulse. But he couldn't stop the images of Jimin's gaze, the warmth of his hand, the unspoken promise that lingered like smoke in the air. Somewhere deep inside, he knew things had changed. Forever. The rehearsal room smelled of polished wood and faint sweat, a scent Jungkook had long associated with discipline and exhaustion. Yet today, it carried a new tension, one that seemed to coil in his chest tighter than any choreography ever could. He tried to focus on the music, on the mirrors reflecting precise angles and movements, but every note vibrated like an echo of Jimin's touch. "Jungkook, you're off beat again," the choreographer barked, snapping him back to reality. The words should have stung, should have ignited frustration or embarrassment, but instead, Jungkook barely registered them. His mind was elsewhere, looping over the warmth of Jimin's hand, the way it had pressed insistently into his own as if to anchor him in a storm he hadn't known he was in. A sudden shadow fell over him, and his stomach knotted. He looked up, heart skipping a beat, to find Jimin leaning casually against the doorway, eyes dark, unreadable, and magnetic. "You can't hide behind rehearsal forever," Jimin said, voice low, teasing, dangerous. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Jungkook's throat tightened. He opened his mouth to deny it, to insist he hadn't, but the lie caught in his chest. I don't know what you mean," he muttered, barely convincing even to himself. Jimin stepped closer, closing the distance in a way that made the air itself thicken. His presence was suffocating and exhilarating all at once. "Don't lie to me," he said softly, almost tenderly, yet there was a steel edge in his tone that left no room for argument. "I saw you tremble. I felt it when I touched your hand. You can't pretend you didn't feel that spark." Jungkook swallowed, a rush of heat flooding his ears. He had always been careful, always calculating the right balance between proximity and distance, the fine line between professionalism and vulnerability. But Jimin had thrown that balance into chaos with a single, electrifying touch. I can't," Jungkook whispered, his voice cracking despite his best efforts. "We can't, people are watching, everything." His words stumbled, lost in the surge of emotions he had no right to feel. Jimin's hand found his again, this time sliding deliberately to brush along Jungkook's knuckles. The gesture was intimate, deliberate, and incendiary. "People are always watching," Jimin said, his voice a dangerous purr. "They've been watching since the day we met. But sometimes, you have to stop thinking about them. Sometimes you just have to feel. Don't you want to feel this? Don't you?" Jungkook's knees threatened to buckle. He could smell Jimin's cologne again, that faint citrus undertone that now carried the weight of temptation. His mind screamed at him to step back, to regain control, but his body betrayed him. Every nerve ending was alert, every heartbeat pounding with a rhythm he could no longer suppress. I don't know if I can," he admitted, voice low, raw, almost pleading. Jimin's lips curved into a faint, predatory smile. "Then let me help you," he whispered, closing the distance so that their foreheads almost touched. The heat between them was palpable, a magnetic pull neither could deny. "I'll make you trust me, Jungkook. I'll make you see that this isn't a mistake. Not for us." The room seemed to vanish. All Jungkook could perceive was the brush of skin against skin, the weight of Jimin's gaze, the electricity of their shared heartbeat. He wanted to resist, wanted to pull back and breathe rationally, but his fingers curled instinctively into Jimin's, seeking contact he wasn't sure he deserved. "Do you really mean that?" he asked, voice trembling. "Every word," Jimin said, a mixture of conviction and vulnerability threading through the syllables. His hand tightened slightly around Jungkook's. "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." Jungkook's mind spun. The rehearsals, the staff, the schedules, the constant scrutiny, all of it fell away beneath the gravity of Jimin's presence. And then, as if the universe wanted to remind him of reality, a staff member's abrupt clearing of the throat snapped the moment. Both of them jerked slightly, hearts racing, awareness of the world outside their bubble returning like a cruel splash of cold water. The staff member stammered, unsure how to address the charged scene in front of them. Cameras were set up in the corners, microphones pointed suspiciously, and yet no one dared intervene directly. They could sense the storm, the tension, the unspoken connection crackling in the air. Jungkook slowly withdrew his hand, though his body still hummed with energy. We can't let anyone see," he murmured, trying to steady himself, but every word was thick with desire and fear. Jimin's eyes softened but never left him. "Then we don't," he said. "We'll figure this out. Just trust me." And in that moment, Jungkook realized he already did. Even with the chaos of their world, the impossible scrutiny, and the silent dangers lurking everywhere, he trusted Jimin. Trusted him more than anyone, more than he had trusted himself. The rehearsal resumed, but the room felt different. The music sounded sharper, the mirrors more reflective, every movement charged with a tension that could ignite at any second. Jungkook could feel Jimin's eyes on him, could sense the promise in every glance, every subtle gesture. It was thrilling, dangerous, intoxicating, and completely uncontrollable. And as the day wore on, every step, every beat of the choreography, every fleeting touch or accidental brush of fingers, reminded Jungkook that nothing would ever be the same. The connection had been made. The rules had been broken. And the fire between them had only just begun to burn. The night air was heavy and thick with the scent of rain-soaked asphalt as Jungkook stepped out of the studio, his jacket clinging damply to his shoulders. He could still feel Jimin's touch on his hand, a lingering warmth that refused to fade, as if Jimin had branded a part of him that no one else could reach. Every shadow along the dimly lit street seemed to pulse with the memory of that contact, making his heart race in a rhythm that felt almost reckless. Jungkook. The whisper came from behind him, soft, teasing, yet loaded with danger. He froze, the hairs at the nape of his neck standing on end. Jimin emerged from the studio doorway, wet strands of hair plastered to his forehead, eyes glinting with a mixture of mischief and intensity that made Jungkook's knees weak. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Jimin said, closing the distance, the tips of their shoulders brushing with each step. "What if someone saw you? What if—" His words faltered, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable, a side of him Jungkook rarely glimpsed. I can handle myself," Jungkook muttered, though his voice betrayed the truth. He could barely breathe, barely think past the magnetic pull of Jimin standing so close, his hand occasionally grazing Jungkook's, sending sparks that crawled under his skin. Jimin's grin was slow, knowing, and almost predatory. "Handle yourself," he repeated, voice low. "You trembled when I held your hand. Admit it, Jungkook, you wanted this. You want me." Jungkook's chest tightened, and a shiver ran down his spine. He wanted to retreat, to hide behind reason and logic, but his body refused. He could feel the heat radiating from Jimin, smell the faint trace of rain mixed with the same citrus cologne, and hear the unsteady rhythm of his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. Jungkook began, voice barely audible, but Jimin cut him off. "You don't have to say it," Jimin whispered, stepping closer so that the space between them seemed to vanish entirely. "I know. I feel it too." And then Jimin's hand found Jungkook's again, fingers entwining, holding on with a possessive insistence that made the world outside disappear. Jungkook's body betrayed him. He trembled, caught between fear, desire, and the undeniable pull of the connection that had been ignited between them. "You don't understand what this could mean," Jungkook said, words spilling out in a rush. "People are watching. Staff, fans, everyone. If they find out, I don't care," Jimin said sharply, eyes burning into his. "I've spent too long pretending I care what they think. I've spent too long hiding who I am, hiding us. And I won't do it anymore. Not for anyone, not for anything." The honesty, the raw edge in his voice, made Jungkook's breath catch. Every instinct screamed to resist, to pull back, but every nerve ending in his body urged him forward. He could feel the pull of Jimin's presence like gravity, inescapable, undeniable. I don't know if I can handle this," Jungkook admitted, voice trembling. I've never felt like this before. It's too much, too fast." Jimin's fingers tightened around his, the pressure a dangerous mix of reassurance and command. "Then let me guide you," he murmured. "Let me show you that this isn't wrong, Jungkook. That it's real, and it's worth it. Don't you trust me?" Jungkook's throat constricted. He wanted to resist, wanted to cling to safety, but the truth was undeniable. He did trust Jimin. More than anyone. More than he trusted himself. And that trust terrified him more than anything else. I do, he whispered finally, almost inaudibly, his lips barely moving. Jimin's eyes softened, but the intensity never left them. He leaned closer, just enough that Jungkook could feel his breath, warm and electric against his cheek. "Then let's stop pretending we can go back," Jimin said, voice low, almost reverent. "Let's stop running from this, from each other. Just feel, Jungkook. Feel everything." The rain began to fall harder, droplets pattering against their shoulders, soaking their clothes, but neither of them moved away. Jungkook's mind raced with the impossibility of the moment, so reckless, so dangerous, but he couldn't deny the fire in his chest, the way his body and heart both demanded more. "Do you really mean that?" he asked, eyes searching Jimin's for any hint of hesitation. "Every word," Jimin said, closing the last inch between them, lips barely brushing the shell of Jungkook's ear. "I'll never let go. Not now, not ever." And in that charged silence, with the storm raging outside and the world oblivious to the moment unfolding, Jungkook felt a surrender so complete it was almost painful. The connection, the touch, the unspoken confessions, they were all here, real, unstoppable. For the first time, Jungkook let himself believe that some risks were worth taking. That some fires, no matter how dangerous, were meant to be touched, to be burned by, and to ignite something irreversibly beautiful. The rain soaked them through, the cold biting, yet Jungkook felt only one thing: heat, desire, and an unshakable pull toward Jimin, the hand that held him, and the promise of something neither of them could deny. The studio was quieter than usual, the echoes of earlier rehearsals lingering like ghosts. Jungkook sat in the corner, arms wrapped around his knees, trying to steady his racing heart. Every muscle in his body still tingled from the memory of Jimin's touch, the way it had brushed over his hand, lingered in a silent promise. He could feel it under his skin, in the tremor of his fingers, in the rapid pulse at his throat. He had tried to bury it, to tell himself it was just adrenaline, just a fleeting moment, but it wasn't. It was too real, too consuming. "You've been avoiding me," Jimin said, voice breaking the silence like a charged wire. Jungkook looked up, startled, and saw him leaning against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp but not angry, just piercing in a way that made Jungkook's chest constrict. "Not avoiding you," Jungkook stammered, even though his words were hollow. He could see the doubt flicker across Jimin's face, and guilt coiled in his stomach like a snake. "Yes, you are," Jimin said, stepping closer. Each step seemed deliberate, measured, designed to shrink the distance between them. "I can feel it. Don't lie to me. You've been tense, restless, and it's not just because of rehearsals." Jungkook's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to deny it, but he couldn't. He swallowed hard, feeling the raw, dangerous honesty building in his chest. I don't know how to handle this," he admitted, voice cracking despite his effort. "It's too much. I feel everything, Jimin, and I can't." Jimin closed the last few steps, stopping so close that Jungkook could feel the warmth radiating off him. "You don't have to handle it alone," he whispered. His hand brushed Jungkook's, a fleeting contact that made the world around them vanish. "You don't have to be strong all the time. Not with me." Jungkook's body reacted before his mind could catch up. His fingers trembled, brushing against Jimin's without thinking, and he realized with a jolt how desperate he was for the connection, for the comfort, for the danger that made his heart race like a drum. "I'm scared," he admitted, barely a whisper, the words tasting of vulnerability he had never allowed himself to show. "I'm scared that if I let go, if I feel it, everything will change, and I don't know if I can." Jimin's hand cupped his cheek, thumb brushing lightly over the trembling skin. "Everything will change," he said softly, almost reverently, "but not in the way you fear. I won't hurt you, Jungkook. Not now. Not ever. You just have to trust me." The intensity in Jimin's gaze, the heat in his hand, the promise in his words, it all crashed over Jungkook, leaving him gasping. He could feel himself falling, letting go of the tight control he had always clung to, surrendering to the storm of emotions he had been denying, and then, suddenly, the door swung open, slamming against the wall with a loud bang that sent both of them jolting apart. A staff member's shocked expression froze in the doorway, eyes wide as if they had walked into a private world they had no business seeing. Rehearsal is starting, sir," the staff member stammered, averting their gaze quickly, but the tension had already been broken, leaving a strange mixture of exhilaration and embarrassment lingering in the air. Jungkook's fingers lingered in empty space where Jimin's had been, his heart hammering, his mind spinning with what had just passed. He wanted to retreat, to run, but Jimin's eyes held him in place, dark and unrelenting, silently daring him not to flee. "Don't run from this," Jimin said, his voice low, commanding. "Not tonight. Not ever." Jungkook swallowed, every instinct screaming caution, yet every nerve in his body craving the connection he couldn't deny. He nodded, almost imperceptibly, letting himself be caught in Jimin's orbit. For the first time, fear and desire coexisted in a way that was intoxicating rather than paralyzing. The rehearsal began again, but everything felt different. Every glance from Jimin, every accidental brush of fingers, every shared breath across the studio was charged, electric, and forbidden. Jungkook felt like he was walking a tightrope, balancing on the edge of chaos, knowing that at any moment, everything could ignite into something uncontrollable. And as the lights reflected off the mirrors, highlighting the tension in every movement, Jungkook realized that the hand Jimin had grabbed wasn't just a fleeting touch, it was the spark that had ignited a fire he couldn't put out. Every look, every word, every stolen moment was drawing him deeper, tethering him to a storm he didn't want to survive but couldn't escape. By the time they finished, sweat-drenched and trembling from exertion and emotion alike, Jungkook knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same. He had glimpsed a world of raw desire, of unspoken truths, and forbidden intimacy, and the more he tried to resist, the more he was pulled in, helplessly, irresistibly, toward Jimin. As they walked out of the studio into the night air, rain still slicking the streets, Jungkook kept glancing at Jimin, trying to read the unreadable expression, the dangerous promise in his eyes. He knew that what they were starting, what they had already begun, was more than just a fleeting moment. It was a reckoning, a collision of hearts and secrets, and it was only going to get more intense, more heated, and more impossible to escape. The hotel room was dimly lit, a single lamp casting shadows that danced across the walls. Jungkook leaned against the balcony railing, staring at the city lights flickering like distant stars. His heart was still racing from the earlier rehearsals, from the stolen glances and touches that had left his skin tingling. And yet, despite the exhaustion, sleep was impossible, his mind replaying Jimin's hand on his, Jimin's voice low and commanding, the way his gaze had held Jungkook captive without a word. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called, though his voice betrayed his anticipation. Jimin stepped inside, dripping slightly from the rain outside, hair plastered to his forehead, eyes dark and unreadable. There was a raw intensity in his expression that made Jungkook's stomach twist with a combination of fear and longing. "You've been avoiding me," Jimin said, his voice low, teasing, but carrying a dangerous edge that made Jungkook shiver. He closed the door behind him and moved closer, the space between them charged with electricity. I wasn't avoiding you," Jungkook muttered, but the words sounded hollow even to him. The truth was that he was terrified of how much he wanted Jimin, terrified of the heat rising in his chest every time Jimin was near, and terrified of the consequences if anyone ever found out. "Really?" Jimin asked, stepping closer until the distance between them was almost unbearable. "Because it sure looks like you've been thinking about me non-stop. That your every move has been me." Jungkook's breath caught, and he felt a tremor run through his body. He wanted to resist, to pull away, but every instinct betrayed him. I can't," he whispered, his voice cracking. It's too much." "I don't know if I can." "You can," Jimin interrupted, his hand brushing against Jungkook's. The touch was deliberate, intimate, igniting a fire that Jungkook couldn't suppress. "You just have to trust me. I won't hurt you. Not now. Not ever. Just let go." Jungkook's mind spun. He could feel the heat radiating from Jimin, the subtle scent of rain mixed with citrus that clung to him, the way every nerve in his body demanded more. He knew he should step back, should cling to reason, but the pull was irresistible. Every fiber of his being leaned into Jimin's presence, craving the intimacy, the danger, the undeniable connection between them. I trust you," Jungkook admitted, the words trembling from his lips. "But I'm scared." Jimin's eyes softened, yet the intensity never wavered. He reached out, gently cupping Jungkook's face, thumb brushing against the trembling skin. "Good," he whispered. "Fear means you care. It means it's real. And real is worth everything." The tension between them became almost unbearable. The space in the room felt too small, every sound amplified, the hum of the air conditioner, the distant city noise, the rapid beat of Jungkook's heart. And then, Jimin's hand found Jungkook's again, fingers entwining in a possessive insistence that left him weak-kneed and trembling. "You don't have to fight it anymore," Jimin murmured, leaning in so close that their breaths mingled. "Not with me. Not ever. Feel it, Jungkook. Feel everything. Jungkook's body responded before his mind could catch up. Every thought of caution evaporated as desire and longing surged through him. His fingers curled into Jimin's, holding on, needing the contact, needing the closeness. The warmth of Jimin's hand, the intensity in his eyes, the dangerous proximity, it was intoxicating, overwhelming, and completely consuming. I don't know what to do, Jungkook admitted, voice low and raw. I've never felt like this before. Then let me show you, Jimin whispered, voice soft but commanding. Let me lead you through it. Just, trust me. The words, the touch, the presence, it was a storm Jungkook couldn't resist. He surrendered, letting the heat of desire, the pull of connection, and the thrill of danger wash over him completely. Every hesitation, every doubt melted away in the magnetic gravity of Jimin's presence. For the first time, Jungkook allowed himself to truly feel every spark, every tremor, every forbidden longing. The city lights outside blurred as their world contracted to the space between them, a dangerous intimacy that left no room for anything but the undeniable pull toward each other, and in that charged, electric silence, Jungkook knew something had shifted irrevocably. The connection was no longer just a touch, a glance, a fleeting moment, it was a force, consuming, unstoppable, and impossible to ignore. Every heartbeat, every breath, every trembling fingertip confirmed it. They had crossed a threshold, and there was no going back. The rooftop was silent except for the distant hum of the city, rain-slicked streets reflecting neon lights like fractured stars. Jungkook and Jimin stood side by side, shoulders brushing, hands entwined, hearts still pounding from everything they had risked, everything they had felt, everything they had finally allowed themselves to surrender to. Do you regret it? Jungkook asked softly, voice trembling, eyes searching Jimin's. The vulnerability in his tone was bare, raw, years of fear, doubt, and restraint condensed into a single, fragile question. Jimin shook his head, his hand tightening around Jungkook's. Not for a second, he said, voice low and steady, carrying the weight of truth. Everything we went through, every glance, every touch, every risk, it brought us here. To this. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Jungkook let out a shaky breath, leaning into the warmth of Jimin's presence. The tension that had gripped him for months, the fear of exposure, the danger of desire, the uncertainty of feeling, finally began to dissolve. There was no pretense, no hiding, no running. Only the moment, electric and infinite, stretching between them like the skyline at night. I was so scared, Jungkook admitted, voice breaking, that I'd lose myself, or lose you. You never will, Jimin whispered, brushing a damp strand of hair from Jungkook's forehead. His fingers lingered, gentle but firm, grounding Jungkook in the reality of them. I'll hold on to you, no matter what. You don't have to be afraid anymore. For the first time, Jungkook believed it. He let himself lean fully into the closeness, feeling the steady pulse of Jimin's heartbeat beneath his fingertips. The storm of emotions, the desire, the fear, the thrill, the uncertainty, collapsed into one undeniable truth. They were together, fully, irreversibly, and beautifully. They stood like that for a long moment, rain dripping from their hair, mixing with quiet laughter, shared relief, and unspoken promises. The chaos of the world, the staff, the cameras, the endless expectations, they existed outside the fragile bubble of connection they had created. And in that bubble, there was only trust, only surrender, only the fierce, consuming heat of a love that had fought its way through fear and hesitation. Jungkook finally turned to face Jimin, eyes shimmering with emotion, lips barely parting. I trust you, he said, the words a vow, a declaration, a surrender. And I trust you, Jimin replied, leaning in so their foreheads touched, sharing warmth, breathing, heartbeats. The world outside could wait. Nothing else mattered. Not the whispers, not the rules, not the danger. All that existed was them, together, hand in hand, finally unafraid to feel, to love, to be. The city sprawled endlessly below, lights flickering like 1,000 tiny witnesses, but Jungkook and Jimin didn't care. They had crossed every boundary, faced every fear, and survived the fire between them. And in the quiet aftermath, with rain dripping from the edges of the rooftop, they knew this was only the beginning. The storm had passed, but the fire, their fire, would burn forever.